And I joined at 23 years of age as a service manager. Bearing in mind, I'd never even seen a garage workshop before. And by the time I was 25, I was after sales manager. And 26, I was running one of the dealerships.
And again, not many leaders necessarily get to that stage of having that moment of actually thinking, no, why am I doing this? So that leads on to the next question, really. Bearing in mind what you described about what your childhood was like and these big ideas, the ambition, and you know, not being a workaholic, but working really, really hard until that point. How did you have to adapt your leadership style to reconcile then these other priorities now that you've put at the top of your list?
Well, I realised then there were three things that were important to me. Even though my family was the most important, I actually put myself as number one. And why? Because if I couldn't look after me, then I wouldn't be there for them. And they were a close number two because they were the reason I wanted to be as good as I could be. And the work was the means of supporting both of us and the family, direct and obviously extended.
Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. Today, I'm delighted that Adrian Hallmark has joined me in the studio. Adrian joined Bentley Motors for the second time in his career in February 2018 as chairman and CEO. His first experience at Bentley was as a board member for sales and marketing from 1999 to 2005, during which time he drove the definition and delivery of the growth strategy for the new generation of Bentleys, which redefined the marque and created a new segment. He has had 25 years of global and regional automotive board level responsibility in the UK, the US, and Asia, with Porsche, Volkswagen, Jaguar Land Rover, and Bentley Motors. Adrian studied mechanical engineering at the University of Wolverhampton in the UK and has a diploma in management studies from the Henley Business School and an honorary doctorate in engineering from the University of Wolverhampton. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us from Bentley and Crew today. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and your current focus.
Well, as you've eloquently said, I'm the chairman and CEO of Bentley Motors at the moment. I'm almost 6 years back in the company. Interestingly, that's the same amount of time that I was here first time, but this time I plan to stay a little longer until we deliver our first of 5 battery electric vehicles. So where I am at the moment is through a process of transformation of the company over the past 5 years, making it stronger, more profitable than it has been ever in its history, but at the same time preparing a new strategy for up to 2030 where we literally transform the whole company, facilities, technologies, products, and ultimately the brand positioning, and become a fully electric car company, only electric cars and carbon neutral. So it's a huge strategic and operational and inspirational challenge that I'm honoured to be in the position to be able to lead, and that's where I am at the moment.
Yeah, great. And it's always the case with everyone that comes on the show, from quite rightly focus on their focus from a business perspective. And I'm sure the audience would like to know a bit more about Adrian on the personal side and what you do when you're not working.
Good question. So where I am at the moment with that is pretty much where I've been for a lot of my life, which is relatively active. I've got a quite mature family, a wife with whom I've been happily married for, I have to keep checking, 36 years. We have 2 children. I hesitate because one's 35 and one's 29, and they're both married. And I spend my time when I'm not here commuting back to Geneva, which is where the family are based, and I live at weekends when I can get back. And as well as obviously spending time with them and friends, I do quite a bit of cycling and a lot of skiing And that's how I fill any spare time that I have. I don't take long holidays. I just make the best of plenty of weekends and long weekends, and thankfully still active.
Yeah, and I remember when we last spoke, you told me a really great story about your cycling in the past, so that might come up later. Thank you for that. And I think our audience are very interested to learn about what makes successful leaders. So sometimes it's about what shaped us in childhood and our earlier years, and we learn those lessons. So just for the audience, tell us a little bit about the experiences in life that shaped your leadership style.
I'll go back. Excuse me. I'll go all the way back to the beginning, but I'll keep it simple.
Yeah.
I had a fantastic childhood. I came from a working class family. Both my parents worked in factories of different types when I was born. I had everything that I thought I wanted, but as I grew older, I realized there was a lot more that I actually would like to achieve. And I never saw myself as being underprivileged in any way, living in that environment. But I always knew there was something bigger and better that I could do, and there was something out there. So from a very young age, I remember I was full of ambition and ideas to be something and achieve things, whether it was in sport or music, actually. I had no interest in work per se, not when I was very young. And when I think back, that kind of early phase, I always had 2-3 times more hobbies than my friends. I was never the absolute best at anything, but I could do most things as well as most people could do it at their very best. And I loved it. I was just hungry for experience and learning. And I love the vulnerability and excitement, that mixture that you get when you're doing something that you don't know how to do and you want to master it and be competent at it. So I've always loved that kind of, I love puzzles, I've loved complexity, I've loved learning things. And I've always been open to good advice from people that I respect. And that's what I remember most about my childhood.
And talk to us a little bit more about the role models that were around, because I know you mentioned to me in the past, although the family was a very important element of your younger years, you also had role models outside of the family. Just tell us a bit more about the impact they had on you.
Yeah. I think if you go to when I was up to, say, 16, 17 years of age, I had 2 role models, actually. One was my grandfather, because of his loyalty and commitment, away for 4.5 years of the Second World War, came back and was the proudest, most nurturing father to my father you could imagine, and to me as a grandson. And he was a great character and an inspiration. And he taught me fantastic values when I think back. And he was a strong influence. Obviously, my parents were great influences too, but then, because I was way too bigger than the house and their expectations, I lived close by to someone that was 10 years older than me. I was circa 15, he was 25. He was already partner in a significant business that he'd taken over and grown massively. And he raced motorcycles. And my dream, since I was 8, was to be a motorcycle racer. And I used to go and help him fix his and build his cars that he used to build in his garage. And I'd spend any evening when I had spare time, when I wasn't studying, there doing that. And he showed me what could be achieved if you approach life in a certain way, with energy, courage, a little bit of recklessness, courage plus, push yourself absolutely to the limits. And he got me racing. And it took me 3 years to become better than him. But nonetheless, he was brilliant, didn't resent it. And actually, a lovely little anecdote. The first time we actually raced together, instead of just racing at the same events, in the same expert level, I took him out in a corner and he came off and broke his wrist quite badly. And I'd never felt so bad in my life. Got back to the paddock and they'd strapped him up before he went to hospital. And he said, well, you may as well race my bike as well, because normally there were 2 different categories. For the rest of the season, race the 500cc as well as your own 250, you'll get fitter. That was his first response after broken his wrist. So that really opened my eyes up to business, because I used to work part-time in their business as well, and to nurturing people. And that was a really formative first step in my development.
And if we go into your earlier leadership years then, because when we're younger, in our 20s, we're learning, we're making mistakes, we're using our superpowers that have been developed through our childhood and that ambition that you had. So what were your superpowers at that time, and how did they manifest in terms of your early leadership years?
So the first thing, I guess, was my work ethic. And I'll start with very quickly with school, and then college, or poly then, which became university, and then onto the workplace. And it was the same on the motorbike. I was obsessed whenever I did anything about doing the best I could in the shortest possible time. A bit like Gino D'Acampo, maximum pleasure, minimum effort. But my minimum effort was almost obsessive. So, for example, any homework that I ever had, I would do it at break times, lunch times, and stay over for half an hour at school, so that when I got out of school, I could go on my motorbike or cycle or run or train or go to the gym or whatever it was. And the same when I went to poly and uni. So I would always maximize my time available to enjoy myself and do all the necessary work in the shortest possible period the best I could. When it came into the workplace, my work ethic really helped me, and so did my ability to learn quickly and manage complex and dynamic situations. I actually started out in engineering. I was a design engineer, only studied for a year and a half. I then went into the retail motor industry. And why? Well, the guy that helped me get racing, he was the owner of 5 car dealerships that were big and very successful. And I joined at 23 years of age as a service manager. Bearing in mind, I'd never even seen a garage workshop before. And by the time I was 25, I was after sales manager. And 26, I was running one of the dealerships. And my drive, determination, willingness to learn, motivate people, understand anything that was going on, and being able to organize it in a way that got people engaged and motivated, that was then my superpower. And I would always be first in and always last out, and my family suffered. So that was the phase 1, if you like, that got me up and running and to some level of initial success at a very young age, actually.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that as well. And obviously, the what comes next is about you realizing about the family sacrifice in that case, I guess. So, at some point during our careers, and you've been very successful in what you do, we get to that stage in life. And sometimes it's maturity, sometimes it's an event where we notice that what served us to this point and all that drive you've been talking about sometimes starts to impact our leadership negatively or our relationships negatively. Can you recall when that point happened for you?
Well, when I think back now, it was happening all the time, but I only realised it in about 2 years after that, actually. So the transition there, that was an interesting one. This could be a lesson. I wouldn't recommend this, by the way, but I wouldn't change it. Yeah. So what I did, as well as doing a full-time job, I figured I don't want to be in a car dealer all my life. I've been in engineering. I want to create things. I want to be in a car manufacturer. I want to run a global car company. And that's when I'm standing in a service reception or a parts reception or a showroom in the West Midlands in a Volvo store. So I applied for a regional manager position at Porsche in Reading, and I got it. And I took about a 40% salary drop in order to be able to move into at least a factory-owned distribution company that gave me a pathway to either go back into retail in a bigger group, in a bigger role, or grow through that organization and get the skills that you need to be in an automotive construction environment. And that was pretty traumatic in many ways, moving south. I was lucky that we'd done a couple of properties when I was young. My first one was 24, second one was 26. And by the time I got to Porsche, at least up in Shropshire, I got no mortgage and a reasonable size house. And when I went down south, I suddenly had to have a big mortgage and a small house. And I was away all the time, and I had a young son with problems, which are fine now, but he was very ill when he was very young. And my wife did it all. And the thing that changed me, most listeners probably won't remember the Filofax but it was a paper version of your smartphone with your calendar and your life organized within it. And we were all given a version of a file of facts called a time management system. And we had to go on a training course to be able to use it. We weren't allowed to open the box until we'd done the day's training. Of course, I turned up to the training late and was the object of, I was the exemplar for why time management was so important for all 30 students in the particular session that were from all different industries. And we spent the first 2 hours going through an exercise, which was actually a real pivotal moment in my career, in my life, which was your top 10 priorities. Because before you plan a diary, it's a good idea to know what's important to you. And this was simple, so I just wrote down the 10 priorities, and so did everyone else. Anyway, you guess what's coming next. You then had to get it down to 5, then to 3, then to 2, and then to 1. And that took 2 hours, and people still couldn't get it to 1 after 2 hours. And guess what? Nobody put work as number 1. And what I realized then, there were 3 things that were important to me. And even though my family was the most important, I actually put myself as number 1. And why? Because if I couldn't look after me, then I wouldn't be there for them. And they were a close number 2 because they were the reason I wanted to be as good as I could be. And the work was the means of supporting both of us, and the family, direct and obviously extended. And that model I built in my head. From then on, I committed to try and achieve success in at least those 3 dimensions. Whereas before, it was all about money and growth. It's quite a profound shift. And although I'd never worked only for money, but I was always thinking of the money when I was working. Suddenly, I was thinking about completely different things and trusted the fact that money would come if you did the right things.
I love that, Adrian. And,
so that helped massively.
Yeah. And what I love about that is that, again, not many leaders necessarily get to that stage of having that moment of actually thinking, no, why am I doing this? So that leads on to the next question, really. Bear in mind what you described about what your childhood was like and these big ideas, the ambition, and you not being a workaholic, but working really, really hard until that point. How did you have to adapt your leadership style to reconcile then these other priorities now that you've put at the top of your list?
I think it's not just leadership style, actually. It was my style, everything. So I became, if I look at that period, I went from 22, 23 years of age, being super fit because of my racing. I was really fit. Yeah. And then by the time I'm at Porsche, 6 years later, I was normal to flabby, something like that. And when you've lived a lot of your life in the gym, running, cycling, weightlifting, and then competing at a high level for 8 months of the year at a sport that's more demanding than rugby, I used to train with 2 rugby teams just to try and keep fit in the winter, as well as running a marathon distance per week and 3 or 4 days in the gym. So I was super fit and lost it all. And I lost me. I realized that my well-being was so important to the way I functioned that I had to not maybe be like I was when I was competing, but I had to be strong and fit and healthy. And then secondly, that my wife was doing everything and it was totally unfair. And I need to find space and time to be there for her and not be work selfish. And I also needed to be much more focused at work and get all the stuff done that I needed to get done, but not let the other 2 suffer. And I've said to many people, I've never achieved 9 out of 10 in all 3 at the same time. I've actually achieved 10 out of 10 on any one of them at different times, but I've never achieved 3 9s. I'm still trying. And if you don't stop trying, then you get out of balance. And I know now when I'm out of balance. So the way it affected leadership was I became no less intense about what needed to get done, but I was far more ruthless about, like I was at school, about getting the work done when I was at work and being able to compartmentalize and mentally switch off, plan time to do other things. And if it wasn't working, when it felt wrong, recognize that signal and do something about it and rebalance. And that was a big, no one told me that, but after I'd found the priorities, this just became like such an obvious thing that I had to do, that I did it. And I've always strived to get 3 nines.
And what I love about what you said there as well is that it builds into this thing you mentioned earlier about the trust as well. So trusting that obviously looking after those first 2 things lead to the success in the third and the money, and making sure you're making an impact in an efficient way. But we still have what I call saboteurs within our heads, and whether it's Steve Peters around the chimp paradox, those negative voices, those doubters that are saying, actually, is this going to work out? So how over the years have you actually kept those saboteurs at bay? How have you kept the negative thoughts away from you, trusting that you're doing the right thing?
I never have. I'm always, I still am. I'm always swirling with negative thoughts. But I say negative, I don't see them as negative. I see them as, sorry, I'll rephrase that. Of course, there are times when I feel negative. I'm a human being. But when it comes to progress and success, I do think a lot. And what I try and do is quantify those concerns in a kind of abstract but formal way. It's bizarre. So I try and work out, is this a real risk, or is it just me being timid? Am I not confident enough? I look quite confident and I come across as quite confident, but believe me, inside, like all of us, I have no idea what's going to happen next. I don't know absolutely whether things will work. But if you start to think them through and map them out and directly or indirectly quantify the things that you could happen, and then watch what happens, often, and I've done this many times, most of the things that you worry about never go wrong. It's the other things that you never thought about that cause you the stress. And I'm not fully self-aware, but I am quite open to feedback. I have to be. I never think that I'm absolutely right, although I give strong signals and leadership when necessary, but I'm always open to input. And I think that's true on a personal level too. I mean, we're just going through a coaching program now. It's the 5th one in my career. Really intensive, absolutely to the core, right down at an emotional level, with a group of people with whom trust is the only way to get things done. And I absolutely love it because you learn things about your impact that you would never do in a normal transactional business situation. So being prepared to take on the way people see you and to not react to it, but to think about it, to question why that's the case, to test different ways of doing things. That for me has been another common theme through my career. And final point on that would be the guy in the garage that got me started racing when I was 15. One of the most memorable things he said about me, and he said many, but the thing that sticks in my mind the most that I reflect on is I was the most coachable person he'd ever met. And, you know, if I went water skiing for the first time and I was told you need to start on 2 skis, I would insist on starting on 1, but just tell me how to do it. And when I get it wrong, tell me what I did wrong and I'll fix that. And I'm keen to break things down and build them back up and be honest about whether I did it or not. And then you get better. And then 3rd pull, I was up on 1 ski. I fell over, of course, and had the full normal irrigation process that happens when you fall off a water ski. But it's that kind of approach that I take to mono skiing or boardroom performance.
Thank you. And for the audience that are listening to this, where they resonate with your story of having, you know, a childhood which shaped them because of their systems they were within, and obviously from their own belief systems as well, to then having a point in their lives where they decided to have to make a change, you know, and to change that and then become more mature around that and manage themselves. What advice would you give to our audience out there, how to channel that earlier experience into sustainable leadership?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's journey is different. And I love the cliche that no one is self-made. We all need mentors. And even if you're proud and obstinate and stubborn and self-determining, you still need a mentor. And I found that. I would only listen to people that I really respected. And the one lesson I've learned is that from them, you get what you think you need.
Yeah.
But it's also important to get the feedback and to listen to the people that you don't think you respect, because actually, often what they see, the impact that you have and the way that they experience you is almost the yin to the yang, and it gives you a completely different view of who you are and what you could be and how you could change your impact. So my top advice would be, don't be obsessed with success and following a route map that's driven by someone else that is successful and an A to Z of how to get to the top. Also listen to those people that maybe aren't above you, they're alongside you or around you in whatever form, to get a better perspective on your character, how it plays out, and the impact that you actually have on everybody, not just the people that you think are the important ones. That's true within the family, within the workplace, within life in general. And the more you're open to that, you don't have to do everything that everybody says, but just be aware of the impact of what you do is a huge advantage. And it allows you to empathize better, make better decisions, and avoid stepping on as many garden rakes as you may do naturally.
Absolutely. And one final question for me, Adrian, about the future, really. So you've told us about the past, what's been happening, obviously, within Bentley, the future is coming to the next couple of years. But for you, what are you going to be in service of over the next 5 or 10 years, and how can people help you with that?
I'm at that point in my career now where it feels bizarre, because thankfully I don't have many creaks and groans in the body. So when I get up in the morning, I actually don't feel a lot different to 30 years ago, but I am 30 years older. And I'm at the point in my career where in the next 3 to 5 years, I'll step out of full-time corporate life and do something different. And what I found as I've been through my career is that a few people have helped me directly and indirectly to become whatever I am, to achieve the potential that I've achieved. I still haven't achieved the potential that's remaining, and I don't even know what that might be yet, but there's certain things that I do understand, and that's, I love to develop businesses. I love to see people develop, because they're the way that businesses develop. So I started out in engineering, went into retail, went into automotive distribution, then into manufacturer here the first time and back again. And creating things for me is fantastic. But I've also had experience of digital startups and new business models with an incubator that I set up in a previous role. 40 million investment, 36 startups we got going within 3 years, and brought in bankers, investors, private equity, and saw 4 companies grow, flourish, and sell for huge value created from a standing start. And the most satisfying thing, I can't even remember all the values that they were sold for, but I can remember the people, their ideas, their passion, the way they pulled capabilities and other people together and convinced other people on their journey. And beyond corporate life, I'd love to be in a situation where I can either, through some academic research and studies, but mainly through encouraging and participating in startups, mentoring, helping to shape strategy, and help people to develop and grow and avoid some of my mistakes and some of the ones that they're about to make. That for me would be hugely rewarding and probably top of my list for the work part of my triumvirate in the post-corporate period.
Yeah. And what about the other 2 areas?
Family-wise, I already have 1 grandchild, very young, just born, just over a year ago. Being part of that process, I'm really looking forward to. My wife and I, we didn't spend a lot of time together in the first 35 years. We will in the next however long, God willing, we've got left, 20, 30, beyond here. And travel, I've done a lot of travel for work. I want to travel now for pleasure and cultural experiences, as well as be a key part of helping to nurture my grandchild, hopefully children in the future, of course. And absolutely for me personally, as well as the work side, like I've said about never being 3 nines at the same time, a year ago, I was at probably my fittest for 30 years. Did one of the biggest challenges I've ever done and did it really well. And since then, through a couple of bouts of COVID and then an injury from something else, I've probably had the worst year for 30 years. So getting back into that routine for me is absolutely essential because it's part of who I am. I need to be active, fit, and be able to go do things that inspire me. Long distance endurance stuff, seeing new things, being with great people, and taking on challenges in that personal dimension as well. So it's that combination of really enjoying the family, getting back to pushing myself again in a caring but relentless way, and then finishing my mission here to get the company to be electric and sustainably successful and carbon neutral, as well as moving into that second career, if you like, beyond pure corporate. I'm really looking forward to that phase in my life.
Well, Adrian, I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with our audience today. I know that many of them will have been inspired to reflect on their own leadership style, how they might take a different approach to both leading themselves and others in the future. So thank you for all of your thoughts, all of your advice you've given today, and for being so open with us. Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for the opportunity.
I hope all the audience out there enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can find out more information about conscious leadership and self-coaching by typing in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser. So until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.